September 6th, 1983. 6:45 a.m. West Los Angeles. The security supervisor at Wells Fargo's armored car depot is arriving for what should be another routine. Tuesday morning, after the Labor Day holiday weekend, he walks through the loading bay, past the reinforced trucks and steel-plated security doors that protect one of the largest cash distribution centers on the West Coast. Everything appears normal. Same electronic surveillance systems. Same motion detectors. Same impenetrable vault facility that processes over $50 million weekly. Then he notices something that will forever change how America thinks about armored car security. The main vault door is standing wide open, and scattered across the floor are empty cash bags and torn security seals. What he discovered next would become one of the most audacious armored car robberies in American history. Over the 3-day Labor Day weekend, a team of thieves had penetrated Wells Fargo's most secure facility and stolen $7 million in cash. The largest armored car heist on the West Coast at that time. No alarms had been triggered. No security systems had detected the intrusion. It was as if the thieves had simply walked through walls to reach money that was supposed to be absolutely untouchable. But this wasn't a case of high-tech gadgets or elaborate tunneling. This was something far more disturbing. A perfect inside job executed by people who knew every security protocol, every weakness, and every opportunity to turn the system against itself. This is the story of how trusted employees betrayed that trust for the ultimate score, and how their success revealed vulnerabilities that would force the entire armored car industry to rethink security from the ground up. The Wells Fargo depot in West Los Angeles was undished to any cash facility. It was the nerve center for armored car operations across Southern California. Built in 1978 with state-of-the-art security systems, it served as both a storage facility and distribution center for hundreds of millions of dollars that flowed through Los Angeles banks, businesses, and casinos each week. The facility was designed like a fortress. Multiple layers of electronic security monitored every entrance and exit. Motion detectors covered every corridor and storage area. Heat sensors could detect human presence from across large rooms. Most importantly, the main vault required multiple keys and combinations known only to senior management, or so they believed. What made the depot particularly attractive to potential thieves wasn't just the money it contained, but its predictable patterns. Every Friday, massive cash shipments arrived to be distributed to banks throughout the weekend and the following week. During holiday weekends like Labor Day, even larger amounts accumulated as businesses made deposits. But banks remained closed. The depot became a cash storage facility holding amounts that would normally be spread across dozens of individual bank vaults. But all this security was predicated on one crucial assumption, that the people with access to the facility could be trusted absolutely. When that assumption proved false, the entire system collapsed like a house of cards. The mastermind behind what would become known as the Labor Day Heist was Kenneth Kessler, a 37-year-old Wells Fargo supervisor who had worked for the company for 8 years. Kessler wasn't a career criminal. He was a respected employee with security clearance, management responsibilities, and the complete trust of his supervisors. He was exactly the kind of person the security system was designed to protect, not defend against. But Kessler had been watching the millions of dollars that flowed through the depot daily, and he had been planning. Unlike outside criminals who saw only the facility's strengths, Kessler saw every weakness, every gap, every moment when those millions of dollars were vulnerable to someone with inside knowledge and legitimate access. The plan Kessler developed over months of observation was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attempting to defeat elaborate security systems, he would use his legitimate access to bypass them entirely. Instead of fighting the system, he would become the system, using his authority and knowledge to conduct what would appear to be routine operations while actually looting the facility's entire cash reserves. But Kessler knew he couldn't execute this plan alone. Moving $7 million in cash would require multiple people, vehicles, and precise coordination. More importantly, he needed accomplices who could be trusted absolutely, because if anyone talked, they would all spend decades in federal prison. His first recruit was David Lopez, a 29-year-old Wells Fargo guard who had worked closely with Kessler for 3 years. Lopez had gambling debts and financial problems that made him vulnerable to recruitment. But more importantly, he had legitimate access to security systems and vault areas that would be essential to the operation. The second key recruit was Maria Santos, a 31-year-old administrative assistant who handled scheduling and documentation for depot operations. Santos could manipulate work schedules, alter security records, and create the paperwork necessary to make their theft appear legitimate for as long as possible. The final member of the core team was Roberto Martinez, a 35-year-old driver who was a Wells Fargo employee but had connections that would be crucial for laundering and disposing of the stolen money. Martinez understood the underground economy of Los Angeles and could help convert millions in cash into assets that could be traced back to the robbery. The planning phase extended through the summer of 1983, with the team studying every aspect of depot operations, security procedures, and cash flow patterns. But unlike external criminals who had to guess about internal operations, Kessler's team had complete access to information that would normally take months or years to gather through surveillance. They knew exactly when the largest cash reserves would be present in the facility. They understood which security systems could be disabled without triggering alarms. Most importantly, they could plan their operation around legitimate business activities that would provide cover for their theft. The plan they developed was sophisticated in its psychology and execution. They would conduct the robbery during the Labor Day weekend when minimal staff would be present, and their activities would attract less attention. They would use their legitimate access to enter the facility and disable security systems in ways that would appear to be routine maintenance. They would remove cash in amounts and methods that wouldn't immediately trigger investigation. Most ingeniously, they would manipulate records and documentation to make the theft appear to be legitimate cash transfers, buying themselves crucial time to complete the operation and dispose of the evidence before anyone realized what had happened. Labor Day weekend, 1983. Friday evening, September 2nd, as most Los Angeles residents prepared for a 3-day holiday weekend, Kessler's team was putting the final phases of their year-long plan into action. The depot contained an estimated $12 million in cash reserves, more than enough to make them all wealthy beyond their dreams if they could successfully extract even a fraction of it. The operation began at 7:30 p.m. Friday evening when Kessler and Lopez entered the facility using their legitimate access credentials. To anyone observing, it appeared they were conducting routine security checks and weekend maintenance activities that were common during holiday periods when regular operations were suspended. Santos had already manipulated the work schedules to ensure minimum staffing throughout the weekend, and she had prepared documentation that would explain any unusual activity as authorized maintenance and inventory procedures. The beauty of an inside job is that it doesn't look like a crime while it is happening. It looks like legitimate business operations conducted by authorized personnel. The first phase involved disabling security systems in ways that wouldn't trigger immediate alarms or investigation. Lopez used his knowledge of electronic systems to create temporary malfunctions that would appear to be routine technical problems. Motion detectors were adjusted to ignore certain areas. Camera systems were redirected or temporarily disabled for maintenance. Most crucially, they used Kessler's management authority to access the main vault without triggering the multiple authorization requirements that were supposed to prevent exactly this type of theft. The security protocols assumed that management personnel could be trusted absolutely, an assumption that was about to prove catastrophically wrong. By midnight Friday, they had gained access to the facility's main cash storage areas. What they found exceeded their most optimistic projections. The combination of regular deposits and holiday accumulation had created a cash reserve of over $12 million. More money than most people see in a lifetime, stored in a facility that was now completely under their control. The actual theft operation extended throughout the weekend, with the team working systematically to remove maximum cash while maintaining the appearance of legitimate operations. They focused on large denomination bills that would be easier to transport and launder. They avoided taking amounts that would trigger immediate investigation. Most importantly, they manipulated records to make their theft appear to be authorized cash transfers to other facilities. The physical challenges were enormous. $7 million in cash weighs approximately 350 pounds and requires careful organization to transport efficiently. They had to load money into vehicles without attracting attention from neighbors or security patrols. They needed to move multiple loads while maintaining operational security and avoiding surveillance. But their inside knowledge made these challenges manageable. They knew when security patrols would be present and when the facility would be unmonitored. They understood which entrances and exits would minimize exposure. Most importantly, they could conduct their operation at a pace that allowed careful attention to detail rather than the rushed approach that characterizes most amateur crimes. By Sunday evening, September 4th, They had successfully removed $7 million from the Wells Fargo depot. The money was temporarily stored in multiple locations around Los Angeles, while the team prepared for the most dangerous phase of their operation, converting stolen cash into assets that could under be traced back to the robbery. Martinez's connections to underground money laundering operations proved crucial to this phase. Los Angeles in 1983 had extensive networks for processing large amounts of cash, driven by drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and other criminal enterprises. Battling in $7 million required sophisticated operations that could handle the volume without attracting law enforcement attention. The team divided the money into smaller amounts that could be processed through different channels simultaneously. Some was exchanged for precious metals and jewelry. Some was invested in legitimate businesses that could provide explanations for sudden wealth. Some was moved to offshore accounts in countries with bank secrecy laws. But their most clever strategy involved using the stolen money to purchase assets that would appreciate in value over time. Rather than simply hiding cash, they were investing it in real estate, art, and other items that would provide both security and growth. They were thinking like long-term investors rather than short-term criminals. For nearly 2 months, it appeared they had pulled off the perfect crime. The theft wasn't discovered until Tuesday morning, September 6th, giving them a crucial 72-hour head start. Even then, the manipulation of records meant that investigators initially suspected clerical errors rather than theft. It took several days for authorities to realize they were dealing with one of the largest armored car robberies in American history. The FBI investigation that followed was complicated by the inside nature of the crime. Normal investigative procedures assumed external perpetrators who would leave physical evidence of forced entry. But this robbery had been conducted by people with legitimate access who had used that access to defeat security systems from within. The breakthrough came when investigators analyzed the work schedules and security records that Santos had manipulated. Her alterations were sophisticated, but they created patterns that didn't match normal operational procedures. More importantly, the timing of system malfunctions and maintenance procedures coincided too perfectly with the theft to be coincidental. Kenneth Kessler became the primary suspect when investigators discovered financial records showing sudden improvements in his lifestyle. Large cash purchases, debt payments, and investment activities that were inconsistent with his legitimate income created a paper trail that led directly to him. But Kessler had been careful to avoid obvious spending that would attract immediate attention. Unlike many criminals who celebrate their success with conspicuous purchases, he had focused on investments and asset preservation that would provide long-term security rather than short-term gratification. The arrests began in November 1983, nearly 3 months after the robbery. One by one, the team members were identified through financial records, surveillance, and ultimately, testimony from accomplices who agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. David Lopez was the first to be arrested. Caught when investigators discovered large cash deposits in multiple bank accounts. Under interrogation, he provided details about the operation that led to the arrest of the other team members. Maria Santos was arrested at her home with over $200,000 in cash. Hidden in various locations, Roberto Martinez was captured trying to flee to Mexico with a suitcase containing nearly $500,000 in bills. Kenneth Kessler was the last to be arrested, found at a luxury hotel in San Diego where he had been staying under an assumed name. When arrested, he was carrying over $100,000 in cash and had access to additional funds that had been invested in various assets around Southern California. The trial revealed the full sophistication of the operation and the extent to which the thieves had exploited their inside knowledge. Prosecutors described it as one of the most professionally executed armored car robberies in American history, noting the careful planning, precise execution, and sophisticated laundering operation that had followed the theft. Kessler was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, one of the harshest sentences ever imposed for a non-violent property crime. His knowledge of Wells Fargo operations and his abuse of trust were considered aggravating factors that justified the severe punishment. Lopez received 18 years for his role as the inside security expert. Santos got 12 years for a manipulation of records and schedules. Martinez received 15 years for money laundering and conspiracy. But despite the arrests and convictions, only about $2.3 million of the stolen money was recovered. The remaining $4.7 million had been successfully laundered and hidden in ways that investigators couldn't trace. The sophisticated investment strategy the team had employed meant that much of the money had been converted into assets that were difficult to identify and recover. The Wells Fargo Labor Day heist had lasting impacts on armored car security throughout the United States. New protocols were implemented requiring multiple authorizations for vault access, even for senior management. Electronic surveillance systems were enhanced to prevent the type of internal manipulation that had made the robbery possible. Most importantly, the industry began focusing on employee psychological screening and financial monitoring to identify potential inside threats before they could act. The assumption that trusted employees could be trusted absolutely was replaced with verification systems that monitored even the most senior personnel. But the case also revealed uncomfortable truths about the nature of security in Havali industries. No system is stronger than its weakest link. And when that weak link is a trusted insider with legitimate access, traditional security measures become largely irrelevant. The investigation also uncovered broader issues within Wells Fargo's operations, including inadequate oversight of cash handling procedures and insufficient monitoring of employee activities. These revelations led to corporate reforms that extended far beyond the immediate security improvements, affecting everything from hiring practices to financial controls. Today, the Wells Fargo depot robbery is studied in corporate security programs as a classic example of insider threat. It demonstrates how employees with legitimate access can exploit that access for criminal purposes, and how traditional security measures may be inadequate when the threat comes from within the organization itself. The case also highlights the importance of financial monitoring and lifestyle analyses in detecting potential insider threats. Kessler's careful approach to spending might have allowed him to avoid detection indefinitely if not for the sophisticated financial investigation that ultimately exposed his activities. Perhaps most significantly, the robbery demonstrated that the greatest security vulnerabilities often exist not in the systems designed to prevent crime, but in the assumptions about human behavior that underlie those systems. When those assumptions prove false, even the most sophisticated security can be defeated by people who understand it from the inside. If you found this story as fascinating as I did while researching it, make sure you subscribe because next week, I'm investigating the Great Brinkas robbery of 1950, the heist that inspired countless movies and established the template for professional organized crime in America. These stories of insider betrayal reveal the constant tension between trust and security in high-stakes industries. What surprised you most about this case? The sophistication of the inside operation, the success of their money laundering, or the fact that most of the money was never recovered? Let me know in the comments.